Welcome.
Welcome to the Omniverse of Nick and the opening to What If Green Goblin Survived. Before we get into it, be sure to check out the Omniverse's homepage, where our channel mascot Omni will direct you to the Discord, all the Google Docs, and everything else the Omniverse has to offer, along with smashing the like button, subscribing to the Omniverse of Nick, sharing the Omniverse around, and turning on all Omniversal notifications, and commenting future requests and expectations in the comments section. With all that said, let's begin. This is the next Marvel story, which is going to be 3 parts, and it regards the Green Goblin and what if he survived. Now, I have already done Doc Ock and actually made my own Doc Ock Venom, since literally all of the internet never freaking wanted to. Now we touch upon the other Spider-Man villain that deserves a lot more attention than he got, Green Goblin. Now, for those not familiar, Green Goblin, Norman Osborn, is probably, and pretty much is, Spider-Man's, whichever one you want to go with, whether it's Tom Holland, Tobey, or Andrew, or any continuity of Spider-Man, his most dangerous and fearsome villain ever. And he was introduced to us in the first Spider-Man with Tobey Maguire. But he was killed by his own glider in the film, and that was it. But he was brought back in No Way Home, like all the other main villains, and given more chance to show how much of a menace he is, and actually got to live with all the other villains after being cured. But what if that didn't happen? What if the Green Goblin survived? Would he actually remain alive and just remain evil forever? Would he even show up in No Way Home? How would the situation go? That's what we answer today in this part 1 of 3 of the story. We open up with Tobey backing Norman into a corner. And then, whenever Norman tricks Peter with his glider, and Peter blocks it by flipping out of the way with the spider sense, the glider goes into him, and then, Tobey's Peter, he just webs away, and, Norman's dead. That's the end of that, right? Yes, but no. You see, I'm going to say that the superhuman properties and the goblin toxin within Norman allows him to get out of the impalement, but it takes time. Even he thinks that he's dead at one point. But then, after a few minutes, he realizes the glider didn't kill him. Oh yeah, he's bleeding out a lot, but he's alive. But it's not enough for him to actually, fight Spider-Man again. And he's switching between the Norman and the Goblin persona, So it's tough. But with the Goblin persona shifting in and his superhuman properties helping him, he gets out of the glider, throws it down, repairs it, and decides to wait out the next opportunity, however long it might take for him to heal and get better. And then whenever the time comes, Spider-Man, Peter, will die. So, time passes, and Peter and Harry, they go through the school, and, Harry thinks his father's dead, and everything, it pretty much goes all the same, because everybody thinks that Norman's dead, or the Goblin, whatever you want to call him. So then we get to Spider-Man 2's introduction, and Tobey's Peter is fighting against Doc Ock, and the movie's going relatively the same. But someone has been watching the entire thing play out. The Green Goblin has returned after a great deal amount of time of not being there, and has now caught up with the action as Doc Ock and Peter, Spider-Man, are fighting right before they're about to go to the train and fight. So he surveys them until Doc Ock gets away and Peter helps on the train, and then he decides to still bide out time to figure out his next move. But then the Goblin persona starts to mess with Norman's, and just like No Way Home, Norman breaks the Goblin costume. And it's left shattered on the ground, and Norman's just shifted to, just him, you know? That's all we know for now. Doc Ock then kidnaps Mary Jane, and at this point, Norman sees just him being just Norman Osborn. Octavius, what happened to him? And is that Mary Jane? And before long, the Goblin persona switches back, and he gets into his No Way Home outfit of the Goblin, and he decides to track down Doc Ock and Mary Jane, because he knows that Spider-Man's not dead, and that he will follow them. That's when he makes his move. So, we get the final fight between Doc Ock and Spider-Man at the machine, and the whole ending playing out just the same, until Doc Ock is about to sacrifice himself to drown his machine. But then, out of nowhere, they all hear the words of someone they had long presumed dead, and someone Peter never wanted to hear again. Goblin asks if the Spider-Man can come out to play, with his glider and bombs flying towards Spider-Man, Doc Ock, and everybody. Goblin and Doc Ock lock eyes right when Goblin flies in and shoots the bombs at everybody. And then Doc Ock catches and starts to fight off Goblin, as this is now not about killing Spider-Man or Peter now that he knows he's Peter. This is about doing what he knows is right. And if that means protecting Peter to drown the machine and do it his way, now that he's in control of the arms, he will do it. And without even questioning how Norman is back and in the Goblin costume and all this, that, and the other thing, Doc Ock catches Goblin's glider with one of his arms. But Goblin, with his glider, cuts off one of the arms just like he did and uses his bombs and powers, and it's clear he's improved. And Doc Ock being injured and his arms malfunctioning, it's clearly shown Goblin's on top in this fight. And Toby's Peter and MJ cannot believe that not only is the machine getting worse, but Goblin is alive and Doc Ock is struggling. Peter knows the only way that they're going to finally help the situation, destroy the machine, and help Doc Ock is if he drowns Goblin with the machine. And Goblin continues to attack and even now begins to target Peter. But Peter uses all the webs that he can. He's not just using webs, he's using web trapments, balls, strings. He's almost trying to cover the entire, what's left of the building and around Goblin, especially his glider, in webs. And he just keeps on shooting and shooting and shooting and shooting and shooting. He is not stopping. And Goblin, he can't even move at this point. He is completely contained. And he didn't expect Peter to be able to be capable of this. But Peter says, I thought you were dead once. I won't make that same mistake again. And he just keeps on webbing and webbing and webbing and webbing. And Doc Ock says, now's the chance. And he uses his arms along Peter's webs, and they both together drowned Goblin and his glider with Doc Ock's machine. Afterwards, thinking that Norman is finally dead forever and knowing that their fight this entire time has been needlessly pointless, Doc Ock says he can't show himself in this world until he has finally gained control of his arms and until he knows he's no longer a threat. So basically like Doc Ock from a Doc Ock story. So whenever Doc Ock leaves, Peter now knows not only has he got a idea that because Goblin came back and caused this trouble along with Doc Ock the entire movie and everything, Peter knows now more than ever before he has got to not only remain a Spider-Man, but make sure that he improves himself and knows what to do, improves his own lifestyle, and truly shows that he is going to be worthy and ready for whenever another threat appears, especially if Doc Ock isn't able to control his arms and he comes back. So, time goes on. Peter, Harry, and MJ, they go on with the whole thing, and the end of the whole movie and the start of the third goes on. But they decide not to tell Harry that his father was alive, because since, he's actually buried in the seafloor with the machine, what good would be telling him that he came back? What would that do, So they decide not to tell him. Because, like I said, what would be the reason for that, So the third movie begins. Peter is shifting between the prospects of his Spider-Man lifestyle, but he knows this is a different Peter. He knows he has to remain as Spider-Man because Doc Ock is still out there. And the looming threat of what could possibly be a ramification for that and future villains, it's far too concerning a thing, especially with MJ and Aunt May and everything and her health. He has to remain a Spider-Man. So that threat and idea is put more into place whenever Sandman makes his appearance known. And that goes exactly the same. But that's not the only thing that Spider-Man should be worried about, and neither is Doc Ock's eventual return, which would be coming up right about now. But the symbiote of Venom arrives on Earth, but its presence isn't attracted to the likes of Peter Parker, and it's not attracted to Eddie Brock's upturning in rage and hatred for Peter Parker and Spider-Man. Instead, it looms towards a huge field of water that had not been touched, surfaced, or even mentioned or looked upon in many years. But it senses a presence down there, shifting between its last little flickers of life. But it is so weak that the presence is almost not noticed to the Venom symbiote at all. But its power, its genetic makeup, and the similarity of something lurking within this presence draws the symbiote towards it. So it sinks itself down into this body of water until this presence that the symbiote had sensed, it sees it and it latches on. And within just a few seconds, something bursts out of the ocean of water. Green Goblin has resurfaced, but it's no longer the same Goblin. Norman's persona has been completely swallowed out, and instead, the Goblin persona has taken over, shifting into Green Goblin with the Venom symbiote. And now, it only has one thing in mind: kill Spider-Man and Doc Ock. Will he succeed? What will happen with Doc Ock's return? And the second and third coming parts to Green Goblin's survival. And how will Harry react to his father seemingly alive?
Now get out!
What?
Get out! Everybody get out! Welcome!
Welcome to the Omniverse of Nick, and the penultimate part to What If Green Goblin Survived. Before we get into it, be sure to check out the Omniverse's homepage, where our channel mascot Omni will direct you to the Discord, all Google Docs, and everything else the Omniverse has to offer, along with smashing the like button, subscribing to the Omniverse of Nick, sharing the Omniverse around, turning on all Omniversal notifications, and commenting future requests and expectations in the comment section. With all that said, let's begin. We ended off last time with Green Goblin resurfacing with his last little flickers of life, much more closer to death after all these years than in Spider-Man 1. The Venom symbiote, sensing this, latched on, and now we get a venomized Green Goblin. All he wants is revenge, and the Venom symbiote empowers and feeds that, and makes his superhuman goblin powers even stronger. And he flies to find his prey. Whether it's Doc Ock, his own son, or Peter Parker himself. Meanwhile, Peter's not going to become, Bully Maguire or, evil Tobey Maguire or, Venom Tobey, because the symbiote doesn't target him. Instead, he is thinking about Uncle Ben and everything like that. And this time, instead of waking up on the building and then going to get revenge, he wakes up, is very upset at what he wakes up from with the nightmares, and then goes for a confrontation which isn't nearly as clouded by rage as his original one is. So he's plenty mad and wants to go and fight Sandman again, but if anything, he just wants answers, and he wants more of a fight. Sure, part of him wants to kill Sandman, but it's not nearly as clouded with rage because the Venom symbiote isn't triggering it. So he goes and he encounters Sandman in the same place that he did, except it takes a little bit longer, so the fight happens elsewhere, so there's not going to be any mud or anything like that involved, or water or anything like that, and confronts him about the whole Uncle Ben thing. And once he gets there, Sandman is surprised that he came back to fight him again. And after the whole thing, and once Toby's Peter brings it up, then he starts to get more angry. And this time Toby's Peter doesn't attack first. But as the situation escalates and it's not seeming to really gain any answers, especially after the encounter got physical, especially after last time, it just breaks into a fight. Spider-Man versus Sandman round 2. Except it almost goes the same as round 1, with the Venom symbiote not empowering him. Toby's not really gaining a win, but neither is Sandman. So if anything, it's more or less a stalemate. Until, while this battle is going on, mechanical arms impede on the city, which is not even paying attention in the night, on a very different side of New York City. Doc Ock has returned. Making his presence after all this time, just like the Doc Ock story, he has mastered control over the arms and goes to help Peter, because he knows the threat's been going on. He saw the TV, he saw the news just like before. So, he's going to go help Peter. But his path diverges when he sees a glider and a very, 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 very familiar presence. He can't believe it. Osborn? But he was supposed to be dead all those years ago. And himself and Peter made sure that he was actually dead. But this is an Osborn. And it's not the Goblin. Oh, it's the glider. And it's the appearance. But that black presence. That goo on him. This thing. That it must be a symbiote or some kind of creature or parasite. And he sees, without even being noticed, he tracks Goblin. And he sees Goblin's trying to look for Peter, same as him. But he hasn't noticed Doc Ock yet. And on the way, he encounters Eddie Brock. Now, Eddie was just about to go to the church because of his rage towards Peter and the Spider-Man and, that whole thing. Norman, some of his face gets revealed. And he says to Eddie Brock, "You want revenge against Peter Parker and Spider-Man as well, don't you? What if I were to tell you that not only were they the same person, but you could get your revenge on both at the same time?" And he uncovers the Venom symbiote, and it gets off his body, and it latches on to him, Eddie Brock. So within a few seconds, Eddie Brock becomes Venom. But himself, his face gets revealed again after, the symbiote latches onto him. And himself, along with probably the entire audience watching this, is probably like, why would you give up the symbiote? Wouldn't it want you more? Especially because Eddie Brock would definitely know about Norman Osborn and the Goblin, especially after living through 2 movies. And he would be like, why would you give up something this powerful to take down Peter Parker and Spider-Man? Or do you think you're enough, that giving this to me gives you still more of the edge in this alliance of ours? But Norman says, you think that creature was the only one? No. I don't need it. And he says to come with me. I'll show you something that will really change the tide of Peter Parker. So they go to Norman's lab, or his house, but it's a very different part of the house, so Harry would have never been able to understand. So, it's revealed that while Goblin was coming out of the water, and before Doc Ock tracked him again, Goblin, he wasn't flying past New York City, like the part where he was drowned in with the machine. He wasn't flying directly from there. He had actually made a stop and used a part of the Venom symbiote, along with his Goblin toxin, to create Toxin, another symbiote who is especially shown in Venom: The Last Dance. And this is not a symbiote that I'm adding 2 at once. This is Goblin Toxin. So it's basically a copy of a symbiote, not the real thing. So, yeah. Goblin says, I told you, I didn't need the symbiote when I have another one right here. And he pulls open the cage which Toxin is in, and it latches onto him. So now we get Toxin Green Goblin. And gets on his glider and says, let's make Peter Parker, Doc Ock, and Mary Jane and all those suffer. And Eddie Brock says, with the Venom symbiote, gladly. Doc Ock can't believe what he is seeing. Not only is Norman alive because of this creature, but he's aligned himself with a dumb kid, given him the symbiote, and made one of his own using the real thing? Doc Ock knows that the only way that they can possibly win this is if he does not get revealed here by following Norman, and that he goes and finds Peter and his little friends right now. Mary Jane, whatever the frick. And he's also got to warn Goblin's son, because Harry still does not know that Norman survived, even after he came back and fought him. So, he goes as fast and as stealthily as he can with his arms. Thankfully, Norman and Eddie, even though the symbiotes have, picked up senses, along with their own, Doc Ock was still able to get out of there without being noticed. So eventually, Doc Ock finds Tobey Spider-Man and Sandman, who stopped duking it out and were just about to talk to each other after a seemingly just, standoff, like midway's not really gaining anything sort of fight, when Doc Ock appears, frantic. And he tells Tobey's Peter everything about what transpired since he came back here, and that Goblin is alive again. And soon, everybody realizes this is a big threat. Like, they are in big trouble now. And then we get the whole Harry. If Harry got his memory back and everything, so he knows that Peter killed his dad. So now he's at that point where he wants to get revenge. But whenever they get to go warn Harry, Peter uses his webs and Doc Ock uses his arms, along with Sandman restraining him. And then Toby's Peter explains everything. That not only did Norman survive both encounters, but they kept it from him because it would have been pointless. At least, that's what they thought. And after they explain every single little thing about Harry and everything, and all three of them telling Harry about this, Harry is beginning to reconsider his growing hatred and this burning rage inside of him. But it's too late. A bomb, a pumpkin bomb, rings out, and it blows straight into Peter's face, reminiscent of the very first time that this happened. And a glider crashes in to the home of Harry and Norman Osborn. And one symbiote with dark, green, very menacing presence jumps down off of it. And next to him, the Venom symbiote with Eddie Brock inside. And Toxin opens his face to reveal Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin. And Norman, sitting face to face with his father, cannot believe that everything that Peter and them said is true. And now Norman is like, "You're the only one I know that has never betrayed me all these years. Surely you won't allow Peter and these people to lie to you, especially a maniacal scientist like Doc Ock, who turned himself mad with power. Difference between me and him, I've actually succeeded. Join us, Harry. Become who you were meant to be. Is in your blood." Harry thinks about this for a second, now thrown between two wedges. His father's or the right path. And he chooses Spider-Man's and rushes forward. Sandman then goes into Sand Mode and launches weapons after attacks, and attacks Toxin Green Goblin, while Spider-Man attacks Venom. So fight between Sandman and Toxin Green Goblin with the glider rages on. And it does seem like Sandman has some sort of an edge because Green Goblin and Toxin have never encountered him before. But then it starts to become plainly obvious Goblin Toxin's toying with him. And once he figures out about Sandman's powers, he's just messing with him. But then Harry goes to help. And then Toxin Green Goblin, that's when he unleashes it all. Weapon after weapon, after lasso, after pumpkin bomb, after glider attack. And he is even surprised himself that the two are still fighting him on. And at this point, it becomes a full-on battle between Goblin and Harry. And then, all of a sudden, the symbiote seems to just dissolve. Norman's personality, even he thought that it was dead, but no, it's still inside of him. After all these years, he's flashed back. Goblin and the Toxin, they've been ruled out because of this fight. And Norman's just sitting there on the ground. Harry, pumpkin bomb in hand, and Sandman behind him are very cautious. Harry says to his father, "It's not too late. Turn back. Remember who you are. You were not like this. The father Norman Osborn I knew. He might not have been the greatest, but he was no killer. And he certainly was never one who would want his son to join a side that means nothing. But the Goblin Toxin Persona are too strong, and they resurface and fold back over Norman's and stab Harry to death." Norman says, or, Goblin's Toxin's Persona, "You were strong enough to have it all, too weak to take it. No son of mine tells me how to live, especially after you weren't there to see what I went through. My own glider used as a weapon, a maniacal scientist machine to drown me. But now, you won't get the same luxury I had. You die in my place." And he just maniacally laughs as he knows that with this death begins the next phase of their plan. Peter and Sandman will be too distraught. Now they begin the true plan of Goblin's revenge. And with this, Goblin, Toxin, and Venom, they fold out of there quickly. And Toby's Peter and Sandman mourn the death of Harry. And then Sandman and Toby's Peter stare each other down and ask each other one last time, can they work together? Sandman explains everything about Uncle Ben's death and says he doesn't expect forgiveness, but he will do everything in his power to ensure that he does right by Spider-Man and helps him end this battle once and for all. For Harry's sake, for his Uncle Ben's, and every one that Peter cares about. And Peter forgives him, and the deal is set. So, they go to a lab, specifically the lab inside Harry's home, because of the butler's help, and they decide that the only way that they can win this fight without Harry is if they make a cure. What they have to do is get the symbiotes off of both of them. They are more than a match for Venom and Eddie Brock, but they're not a match for Toxin Goblin. He's way too strong. And with Venom Team by his side, they are absolutely no match, even with all of their powers, both of them combined. So what they need to do is find a way to divert the symbiotes off and then cure Norman. Because by then, the symbiote won't be attracted to him. The only reason that it was attracted to him was because of Goblin. But if they can cure Goblin out of him, perhaps that will divert the symbiote away and they can kill both of them. As for Eddie and Norman, they'll cross that bridge when they come to it. So, they are able to cure, or, make the cure for Norman and Goblin. But at another side of the lab, it is revealed Doc Ock is there. Toby's Peter and Doc Ock talk to each other, and it's like, why didn't Doc Ock help them? And it's revealed Doc Ock has a plan. If they really want to win this fight, they have another partner. Him. It's revealed he was in this lab first. He had taken upon Oscorp and the technology here to increase his arms, and he has a plan of his own. and he will buy them both the time that they need to kill the symbiotes and put Norman and Eddie down so they're not a threat. And he says, take all the time you need. If anything, you won't need the cure at all. What does Doc Ock have up his sleeve? Will it actually work? Or will Goblin win and fold in to Goblin truly being the most menacing presence for the ending part next time for the survival of Green Goblin?
Now get out!
What?
Get out! Everybody get out! Welcome!
Welcome to the Omniverse of Nick and the finale to What If Green Goblin Survived. Before we get into it, be sure to check out the Omniverse's homepage, where our channel mascot Omni will direct you to the Discord, all Google Docs, and everything else the Omniverse has to offer, along with smashing the like button, subscribing to the Omniverse of Nick, sharing the Omniverse around, turning on all Omniversal notifications, and commenting future requests and expectations for the future of the Omniverse in the comments section. With all that said, let's begin. We open up where we ended off last time, with Doc Ock going to create a distraction, seemingly in the lab way before Peter and Sandman, with a plan of his own, and goes while Mary Jane and Gwen are kidnapped by Toxin or Lasher Green Goblin, who gets out of the symbiote and menacingly smiles and says that this is the root of their plan. The true plan to finally kill Peter Parker and Doc Ock. They dealt with his miserable son. Now, these two hostages are the perfect way to end all of the problems and hatred they have for Peter Parker and everyone he loves, and then the world is theirs. Venom, with Eddie Brock as the host, he is there teamed up and relishes in what is about to happen. But then he is knocked away by a powerful strike, but the symbiote catches himself midair and lassos on back onto the ground, so it catches him. You know how the symbiote works. Doc Ock has arrived, and he faces down Norman in a battle before the battle of snarky remarks and quips towards their past lifestyles, the men that they turned into, and what they're about to do. But Norman or Green Goblin says any whole part of Norman Osborn that existed, he died the second that you plunged him into the lake with your machine. I can make you join that corpse down there if you want, before we kill Peter Parker. And with that, he turns back into Lasher or Toxin, and Venom rises over Eddie. But just then, something happens. Doc Ock's arms, they turn completely green, and two pumpkin bombs spring out of the ones facing forward in front of him, with the others back and on the ground, waiting for an extra attack and keeping him levitated. And he says, very symbolized of No Way Home, "You want to play games? Catch!" And with the pumpkin bombs in the center of his arms, he throws them, because it's revealed in that lab, Doc Ock upgraded his arms with more Oscorp and Goblin technology and made pretty much Green Goblin arms, Octo arms. So yeah, he throws the pumpkin bombs and throws Venom back. But Venom just keeps on attacking. But it becomes plainly obvious, with Doc Ock using all four arms and the Oscorp Goblin arms at his advantage, and multiple pumpkin bombs and is already potent power and control over the arms, Venom is absolutely no match. And soon, the symbiote starts to just devolve off. And once the Venom symbiote is all, defenseless, it is potent that not only is Venom about to die, but he's no longer with a host. So he gets bombed by Doc Ock to death, with Eddie jumping in, not wanting to lose the symbiote. So he dies too. Then Toxin, Lasher, whatever you want to call him, Green Goblin, rushes forward on the glider and faces down and shows more and more of his power. And Doc Ock knows that even with his Oscorp goblin arms and his mastery over them, this is an even fight. He's actually much more on par with this symbiote goblin than he thought he'd be. But he knows he will not be able to take him completely down. He did take down Venom and Eddie, unfortunately Eddie, but also not. But he cannot take down Goblin. So he yells out, knowing that they're nearby, "Do your plan now!" And all of a sudden, Lasher Toxin Goblin, thinking that Doc Ock's gone more crazy, like him, and is just talking to himself, doesn't pay attention to the fact a huge sand tornado is rushing at full speed towards him. And it plummets him all the way up. And then Peter, Toby, uses his webs, wraps them all around, and gets the symbiote away from Goblin, pulls Goblin forward, and stabs him with the cure. So, no more Goblin. And with Lasher Toxin all by itself, Sandman uses another sand tornado, beats the ever-loving tar out of Lasher Toxin, and then Doc Ock uses his Oscorp Goblin arms, throws pumpkin bomb after pumpkin bomb, and it completely eradicates Lasher or Toxin. And afterwards, the battle has been won. Now, the problem comes down to not only what to do with Norman from here, but Mary Jane and Gwen, because of the whole situation at the beginning of the movie. Because we didn't have evil Toby, so we're not going to have him hitting MJ or, trying to openly cheat on MJ. But there is still a bit of an issue. But Gwen says that she understands, and anything that there was, mixed or, however it came off whenever she kissed Spider-Man before, she did absolutely not mean that. And she understands the whole thing about what happened and everything, and she says she's happy for Peter. And it seems okay. Afterwards, just like the end of the movie, Spider-Man 3, Peter and MJ not only mourn the loss of Harry, Sandman goes away, and as for Norman, he has a long road of redemption ahead of himself, as well as Doc Ock, but they work on it together, since Doc Ock has Oscorp technology, so they're going to revolutionize it in a way that truly means that they can defend the world with Spider-Man, the person who changed their lives forever. And as for Sandman, he just goes off on his own. Now, we get to No Way Home. But, oh boy. If you thought that the Doc Ock story made No Way Home seem pointless just with Lizard Venom alone being the main threat, maybe besides Electro, and Goblin being cured right at the start, yeah, this does not mean anything. We have Sandman, who only fought in the movie just to get home. We have Doc Ock, who is cured with Oscorp technology. We have Goblin, who is cured and alive. So the only two menaces we have in the movie are Electro and Lizard. But with Goblin and Doc Ock. And all three Spider-Men, it's absolutely no contest. They are cured. If Lizard somehow wasn't cured right away after Electro, was cured, if it somehow became a thing, I'm sorry to say, No Way Home, the heroes take it all and show that Goblin, while being the most menacing menace and villain of the Spider-Man universe, just meant an all too happy ending for the Spider-Verse in its entirety. So, we come to the end of another tale, and it was even more better done than the Doc Ock one. But not No Way Home, because for No Way Home to be affected, you would have to make it so Norman and Doc Ock would be put in a situation that either one of them doesn't get the treatment that they got in this story, but the other characters got an upgrade to make them more powerful. And yes, I could have included Lasher and Venom. I could have included a symbiote. But we all saw in the Doc Ock one that even a Lizard Venom, it's just not even worth bringing up. And true, I could have had Lizard and Sandman and Venom in the mix. Yes, that would have been an epic conclusion. That would have been an epic idea. But it still would not have mattered. Because of Doc Ock's huge improvement, Norman Osborn being there as a longer standing figure and redeeming himself after he was cured, and the already impending knowledge of the symbiotes would have made it so that way it wouldn't have even been a fight. You have Toby's Spider-Man, you have Andrew's Spider-Man, you have Tom's Spider-Man, you have Doc Ock, Norman Osborn, you have Sandman, and Electro would have been healed. So even if you throw Lizard into the mix, he would be by himself. Because you can't trust the fact that Sandman, without other villains influencing him to just be bad and be all, I want to go home, so I'm going to team up with all the other villains crap, because it just wouldn't work. True, you could combine Lizard with Venom and then Lasher. Make three freaking unstoppable forces become one. But it really doesn't work. He would be no match. So with that, Tom probably most likely would still want the spell at the end. But it would be a much more peaceful and cinematic moment because of all the figures that have really helped him understand. But then again, he might not even do it. Because look at the Doc Ock story. He would have still done it. But then look at this story. There's so much more success in the multiverse that even Doctor Strange would be one for thinking, okay, since the multiverse didn't collapse in on itself like the canon one and not even the Doc Ock one, okay, maybe the universe and the multiverse is better. But it all depends. What I ultimately think is, even if it didn't happen in the No Way Home iteration, and even if it took more consideration and thought for the almost entire rest of the movie, after basically the beginning solving all of its problems in one, and not even an Aunt May death, it means that we would get a much more wholesome Tom Holland Spider-Man saga, and not have him go down the dark path, because he'd still have a figure in his life, and he would also not have the whole great power, great responsibility, which would honestly take a part of his character out. But when you put everything in the way of Doc Ock and Norman Osborn, they all would teach Tom the lesson that Aunt May would try to teach him, even if it'd be better left for Aunt May. But in this, you can't really depend on that, because if she didn't say it while she was still alive and wasn't put in a situation to die, something else or someone else would take the place of that mantra. Overall, with Norman Osborn surviving, Green Goblin surviving, and so much more to work with than Doc Ock, it means that there's so much more room in the Spider-Man series to make better. Because not only is Norman Osborn a brilliant scientist
and could clone symbiotes, it would honestly mean that Doc Ock would survive, because Norman would take it upon himself to not appear just once, not twice, but multiple times, and he would be smarter, stronger, and he would show that the Green Goblin is the most dangerous, the most influential, and most powerful Spider-Man villain in all of history. And this story should signify that to a T. But with that said, I hope you enjoyed this road into the Omniverse with What If Green Goblin Survived. The next story, it's kind of going to be like the Adam and surviving in Saw, maybe even a tiny bit longer. Don't know that yet. But the next story is What If Eric Matthews Survived, then Breakdown. We are approaching the end of the Roman Reigns list and moving onward with the Omniverse. So, stay tuned, hyped, and packed as we grow the Omniverse of Nick.
Now get out!
What?
Get out! Everybody get out!